Jake Morrison checked his weapon one more time as the cargo ship Stellar Dawn approached Nexus Prime. The space station looked like a giant crystal flower floating in the void, all sharp edges and gleaming surfaces that hurt to look at directly. This was humanity's first real diplomatic mission with the Zephyrian Collective, and Jake wanted everything to go perfectly. "You nervous, Lieutenant?" asked Lisa Chang from the pilot's seat. Her hands moved smoothly over the controls as she guided their ship toward the docking bay. Lisa had been flying ships since she was 16, and Jake trusted her completely. "A little," Jake admitted. He was a Marine, trained for combat, not fancy alien dinner parties. But Earth Command had chosen him to lead the security detail for this mission. The Zephyrians were offering advanced technology in exchange for Earth's agricultural products and cultural artifacts. It could change everything for humanity. Danny Rodriguez looked up from his engineering console, grinning. "Don't worry, boss. I brought our secret weapon." He pointed to a small carrier in the corner of the bridge. Inside, a golden retriever puppy slept peacefully on a soft blanket. "Danny, I still think bringing Buddy was a bad idea," said Dr. Kate Phillips. The xenobiologist was studying her tablet, reading everything she could about Zephyrian culture. "We don't know how they'll react to Earth animals." Danny's face grew serious. "My daughter Emma gave him to me for this mission. She said he'd keep me safe and remind me of home." I couldn't say no to her, Jake understood. Danny's wife had died in a transport accident 2 years ago, leaving him to raise 8-year-old Emma alone. The puppy was Emma's birthday gift to her father, meant to comfort him during the long mission. Jake couldn't bring himself to order Danny to leave Buddy behind. "He stays quiet in his carrier during meetings," Danny promised. Emma trained him well. The docking procedures took an hour. When they finally stepped onto Nexus Prime, Jake felt like he was walking inside a musical instrument. Everything hummed and sang with different tones. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that changed color based on sound. Their Zephyrian hosts were waiting in the main conference chamber. Jake had seen pictures, but meeting them in person was different. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies made of what looked like living crystal. When they spoke, their voices created beautiful harmonies that seemed to come from their entire bodies. "Welcome, humans of Earth," said their leader, who introduced himself as Chief Negotiator Veltar. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We are pleased to begin trade discussions with your species." The first day of meetings went well. The Zephyrians were interested in Earth's wheat, corn, and rice. They had tried to grow similar crops on their worlds but failed. In return, they offered energy storage technology that could revolutionize human space travel. Jake stood guard while Kate and the trade delegates worked out details. Danny monitored their ship systems from a portable console, Buddy's carrier sitting quietly beside his chair. The puppy had been perfect, sleeping most of the time and only making small whimpering sounds when he dreamed. On the second day, everything changed. "What is that creature?" asked Veltar during a break in negotiations. His crystalline head tilted toward Buddy's carrier, and the harmonic tone of his voice shifted to something Jake had never heard before. "That's Buddy," Danny said proudly, opening the carrier. The golden retriever puppy stretched and yawned, his pink tongue curling. "He's my daughter's dog. We brought him as an emotional support animal." The Zephyrians moved closer, their crystal bodies ringing with new sounds. Jake's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm. Something felt wrong. "Fascinating," said Veltar, a domesticated carnivore companion. "We have heard of such creatures but never seen one." "How does it function?" Kate stepped forward, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Dogs evolved alongside humans on Earth. They're not just pets, they're family members. They provide emotional support, protection, and companionship." "Family?" Another Zephyrian spoke, his voice creating discordant notes. "But it is a different species. How can a different species be family?" Danny picked up Buddy, holding the puppy against his chest. Buddy's tail wagged as he looked around at all the tall crystal beings. "That's just how humans are. We love them, they love us. It's been that way for thousands of years." The Zephyrians began making sounds Jake had never heard before, rapid, high-pitched tones that hurt his ears. Kate grabbed her translator device, frowning at the readout. "They're debating something," she whispered to Jake. "The translation is rough, but I think they're calling Buddy a unique biological specimen." Veltar turned back to the humans, his voice now carrying overtones that made Jake's teeth ache. "We would like to propose an addition to our trade agreement. In exchange for improved technology offerings, we request access to this creature for research purposes. Research? Danny held Buddy tighter. The puppy sensed the tension and whimpered softly. We wish to understand the neural pathways that allow interspecies bonding, another Zephyrian explained. Your emotional attachment to a simple animal is puzzling. We could learn much from studying the creature's responses to various stimuli. Jake stepped forward. The dog isn't part of any trade deal. He's not for sale or research. But surely you can obtain another specimen easily, Veltar said, his harmonic voice taking on an edge. Your species reproduces these creatures frequently, yes? One individual cannot be so important. Danny's face went pale. Important? He's not just important, he's family. My daughter loves him. I love him. You can't just take him. The Zephyrians exchanged more rapid, discordant notes. Kate's translator was struggling to keep up, but Jake caught fragments. Irrational attachment. Waste of resources. Emotional deficiency. We do not understand, Veltar finally said. The creature serves no practical function. It does not contribute to your ship's operation or your species' survival. Yet you refuse profitable research that could benefit both our peoples. This is illogical. Jake looked around the conference room. Every Zephyrian was focused on Buddy with an intensity that made his skin crawl. The puppy was just sitting in Danny's arms, panting slightly, unaware that an entire alien species was treating him like a science experiment. The answer is no, Jake said firmly. The dog is not available for research, trade, or anything else. He goes home with us. The harmonics in the room changed again, becoming sharper and more discordant. Veltar's crystal body seemed to dim slightly. This is disappointing, the alien said. We had hoped your species would be more reasonable. Perhaps you need time to consider our offer. We are prepared to triple our technology exchange for access to the creature. No amount of technology is worth Buddy, Danny said quietly. The meeting ended in uncomfortable silence. As they walked back to their quarters, Kate grabbed Jake's arm. Something's wrong, she whispered. The way they were looking at Buddy. It wasn't scientific curiosity. It was hunger. Danny couldn't sleep. He lay in his narrow bunk aboard the Stellar Dawn, listening to Buddy's soft breathing in the carrier beside his bed. The puppy had been restless since the meeting with the Zephyrians, whimpering in his sleep and pawing at the air like he was trying to run from something. The quarters they'd been given on Nexus Prime were comfortable enough. A small suite with 4 bunks, a common area and basic facilities. But Danny felt trapped. Every time he looked out the window at the crystal corridors beyond, he saw Zephyrians gliding past, their harmonics creating an endless symphony that never quite let him relax. Can't sleep either? Jake's voice came from the bunk across the room. Every time I close my eyes, I see them looking at Buddy, Danny whispered, like he was a piece of equipment they wanted to take apart. Jake sat up in his bunk. Kate thinks they might try something. Their whole species evolved differently than us. They don't form emotional bonds the way humans do. How can you be intelligent but not love anything? Danny asked. He reached over and gently stroked Buddy's soft fur through the carrier's mesh. The puppy stirred and licked his finger. I don't know, Jake said, but we need to be careful. Keep Buddy close and don't go anywhere alone. Danny nodded and tried to settle back into sleep. Around midnight, the station's lighting dimmed to simulate night cycle. The harmonics from the corridor grew softer, like a lullaby made of crystal and starlight. That's when the real sound started. Danny woke to complete silence. That was wrong. Nexus Prime was never quiet. The station's crystal structure always hummed with background harmonics, but now there was nothing. Even the air recycling system seemed muffled. He looked toward Buddy's carrier and felt his heart stop. It was open. Empty. Buddy! Danny rolled out of bed, his voice cracking with panic. Buddy! Jake was already moving, weapon in hand. Where is he? I don't know. The carrier was locked. Danny searched frantically around their quarters, looking under bunks and behind furniture. Lisa and Kate were awake now, helping search. Kate was at the door, checking her scanner. The corridor outside shows traces of sonic dampening fields. Someone neutralized the station's security sensors. The Zephyrians, Jake said grimly. They took him. Danny felt like the world was spinning. Emma had trusted him to keep Buddy safe. The puppy was all she had left of their old life before her mother died, when their family was whole and happy. Lisa was already at her portable console, fingers flying over the controls. I'm pulling up the station's security footage, but most of it's been scrambled. Wait, I've got something. The small screen showed a grainy image of 3 Zephyrians moving through their corridor 4 hours earlier. One of them carried a small, struggling form. They have him, Danny said, his voice hollow. Kate's scanner beeped. I'm picking up biological readings from the research wing. Elevated stress hormones, rapid heartbeat. It has to be Buddy. Jake was already putting on his gear. We're going to get him. They moved through Nexus Prime's corridors as quietly as they could. The station was huge, with sections for dozens of different alien species. The Zephyrian research wing was in the deepest part of the station, protected by security fields and diplomatic immunity. As they got closer, they heard it. Buddy was crying, not barking or whimpering, but crying. Long, heartbroken howls that echoed through the crystal corridors like a song of pure misery. The sound cut through Danny like a knife. He'd heard that cry before when Emma was in the hospital and Buddy couldn't understand where she'd gone. He's scared, Danny whispered, tears running down his face. He doesn't understand what's happening. They reached the research wing's main entrance, but security fields blocked their way. Through the transparent barriers, they could see into a sterile chamber, where Buddy was strapped to an examination table. Zephyrian researchers moved around him, their crystal hands holding strange instruments that hummed and glowed. Buddy saw them and cried harder, struggling against the restraints. His brown eyes were wide with terror, and his small body shook with each sob. One of the researchers, not Veltar, but someone Danny didn't recognize, was running some kind of scanner over Buddy's head. On nearby screens, Danny could see brainwave patterns and chemical analyses. Fascinating, the researcher's harmonics carried clearly through the chamber. The creature's distress responses are far more complex than our models predicted. The emotional centers of its brain show activity patterns we've never observed. Another Zephyrian joined the first. The vocalizations seem to be attempts at communication. Perhaps it's trying to summon its pack? Indeed. We should increase the stress stimuli to observe the full range of responses. Danny lunged toward the barrier, but Jake caught him. We can't get through. The security fields are too strong. Kate was working frantically with her equipment. The diplomatic seals are unbreakable. Technically, this is Zephyrian territory. Station security can't help us even if they wanted to. Lisa appeared beside them, breathing hard. I've been talking to the station commander. He says this is a research dispute between sovereign entities. They won't intervene. Buddy's cries grew weaker as the hours passed. The Zephyrians worked methodically, taking readings and samples, discussing their findings in harmonics that sounded like beautiful music but spoke of terrible things. They don't understand what they're doing to him, Kate said, her voice shaking. To them, his fear is just interesting data. Danny pressed his hands against the barrier, feeling utterly helpless. I promised Emma I'd keep him safe. I promised. Jake was talking rapidly into his communicator, trying to reach Earth Command, but the response was always the same. Diplomatic channels would take weeks to resolve this. By then, Buddy would be dead from fear if nothing else. That's when Lisa had an idea. The communication arrays, she said suddenly. They're broadcasting everything from the research wing as part of their documentation protocols. I might be able to boost the signal, patch it into subspace channels. What good will that do? Danny asked. Lisa's eyes were bright with sudden hope. Everyone needs to hear this. Every human in range needs to hear what they're doing to Buddy. She ran back toward their ship, leaving the others to keep watch. Through the barrier, they could see Buddy getting weaker. His cries had become soft whimpers, but they never stopped. Even as the alien instruments prodded and scanned him, he kept calling for help. 20 minutes later, Lisa's voice crackled over their communicators. I've got it. Buddy's distress calls are being broadcast on every human frequency I can reach. The signal's going out on subspace. It should reach at least 3 systems. Danny looked at his friend lying on that cold table, still crying for someone to save him. Will anyone hear it in time? Jake put a hand on Danny's shoulder. If there are humans out there listening, they'll hear him. And if they hear him... Through the research chamber, Veltar appeared, his crystal body ringing with satisfied harmonics. He looked through the barrier at the humans and spoke, his voice translator carrying clearly. Your emotional attachment to this creature is proving most educational. We are learning so much about the inefficiency of interspecies bonding. This research will help us understand your species' weaknesses. Danny stared at the alien, feeling something cold and hard settle in his chest. You have no idea what you've just done. Veltar's harmonics shifted to what might have been amusement. We have taken a simple animal for scientific study. What else could we have done? You've hurt one of ours, Danny said quietly. And now every human who hears his cry will know exactly where to find you. Captain Ben Shaw was reviewing supply reports when the communication came through. The colony ship New Horizon was 3 systems away from Nexus Prime, carrying 15,000 settlers to a new world. Ben had been in space for most of his adult life, first as an army ranger, then as a colonial leader. He'd heard every kind of distress call imaginable, but he'd never heard anything like this. The sound that came through his speakers was pure heartbreak, a young animal's cry for help, desperate and afraid. Ben's dog Rex, a German shepherd who'd been with him for 6 years, lifted his head from where he'd been sleeping beside the captain's chair. Rex whimpered and paced to the door, looking back at Ben with worried eyes. "What is it, boy?" Ben asked, but he already knew. Rex was responding to another dog's distress call, even across the vast emptiness of space. Ben's communication officer, Lieutenant Sarah Wells, looked pale. "Sir, this is coming from Nexus Prime. It's being broadcast on all human frequencies. The source appears to be some kind of research facility." Ben listened to the transmission details, his face growing harder with each word. A human diplomatic mission. A puppy taken for alien research. Diplomatic immunity preventing rescue. He thought about his own daughter back on Earth and how she'd cried when her first dog died of old age. He thought about Rex, who'd pulled him from burning wreckage on 3 different occasions. He thought about what made humans different from every other species they'd met among the stars. "Get me Earth Command," Ben said. "Priority Alpha." Within an hour, the cry had spread across human space like wildfire. Every ship, every station, every colony world with communication equipment was receiving the broadcast. And the reaction was immediate. On the mining station Deep Rock 7, Foreman Carl Murphy listened to the transmission and thought about his own dogs back home. Within minutes, he was organizing the miners' personal ships for departure. Captain Amy Foster of the patrol cruiser Wolfpack changed course immediately when she heard the call. Her crew didn't question the order. Half of them had dogs waiting at home. Admiral Rita Stone, commander of the human fleet at Kepler Station, was in a meeting with civilian leaders when her aide burst in with the transmission. Rita listened for 30 seconds, then stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is over. We have a rescue operation to plan." The civilian leader from the agricultural sector looked confused. "Admiral, with respect, it's just a dog." Rita's eyes went cold. "Councilman, if you can listen to that sound and call it just a dog, then you don't understand what makes us human." Back on Nexus Prime, the Zephyrians were beginning to realize something was happening. Their own communication monitors were picking up increased human ship traffic across 3 systems. Feltar studied the reports with growing confusion. "Why are human vessels changing course toward this station?" he asked his research team. "We have informed them that the creature is simply being studied." The lead researcher's harmonics were uncertain. Perhaps they do not understand the scientific value of our work? But the humans weren't just changing course. They were talking to each other, sharing the broadcast, organizing. On Earth, Senator Janet Brooks was in emergency session with the Colonial Defense Committee. The room was filled with military leaders, politicians, and civilian representatives. "How many ships do we have in range of Nexus Prime?" she asked. Admiral Stone's voice came through the communication link. 12 military vessels, ma'am. But that's not counting civilian ships. We're tracking merchant vessels, colony ships, even private yachts heading for that station. What are their intentions? Same as ours, Senator. They want that puppy back. Senator Brooks thought about her own golden retriever waiting at home. Give them whatever support they need. The authorization came through military channels within hours. Operation Homecoming. For the first time in human history, Earth Command was deploying military assets specifically to retrieve a single animal. On Nexus Prime, Jake and the others were still maintaining their vigil outside the research facility. Buddy's cries had grown weaker, but they never stopped. Danny hadn't left his post in 18 hours, refusing food or rest. Lisa returned from the ship with updates. "You're not going to believe this. I'm tracking 47 human vessels heading our way. Everything from battleships to cargo haulers." Kate looked up from her scanner. 47 ships? For one puppy? That's not all, Lisa continued. I'm picking up transmissions from human colonies across 3 sectors. They're all talking about Buddy. Some of them are sending ships too. Danny pressed his face against the barrier, watching the Zephyrian researchers continue their work. Do you hear that, Buddy? Help is coming. But the Zephyrians were hearing it too. Veltar appeared in the research chamber, his harmonics sharp with concern. The human response is far beyond our calculations. Why are they mobilizing military assets for a single animal? The research leader's crystal form dimmed slightly. Perhaps we have misunderstood the nature of their attachment to these creatures. It is still just an animal, Veltar insisted. They cannot seriously intend to risk diplomatic relations over such a trivial matter. Through the barrier, they could see Buddy on the examination table, still strapped down but now looking around with dull, exhausted eyes. The alien instruments continued their work, measuring and analyzing every aspect of his fear. Jake's communicator crackled with an incoming message. This is Admiral Stone of the Colonial Defense Fleet. Lieutenant Morrison, please respond. Jake nearly dropped his communicator. Admiral Stone? Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Morrison. I didn't expect... Son, we've got the battleship Iron Wolf 12 hours out from your position with a full battle group. How's the puppy holding up? Jake looked through the barrier at Buddy's small, trembling form. He's alive, ma'am, but barely. The aliens are using him for stress response research. He's been crying for 20 hours straight. That ends today, Lieutenant. Keep him safe. We're coming. Word of the Admiral's personal involvement spread quickly through Nexus Prime's alien population. The station commander, a 6-armed Hectorine named Wix Thule, called an emergency meeting with all diplomatic representatives. The humans are sending a battle fleet to this station, Wix Thule announced, his translator converting his chittering into standard galactic. Over a single animal. This is unprecedented. The Alteran ambassador rippled with confusion. Surely they cannot be serious. The creature has no strategic value. But the Kelran representative, whose species had been trading with humans for several years, spoke up. You don't understand humans. We've seen their colonies. They share their homes with these animals. They treat them like offspring. That's impossible, the Zephyrian delegate protested. Cross-species emotional bonding at that level would be evolutionarily disadvantageous. It makes no logical sense. Logic has nothing to do with it, the Kelran replied. It's about love, and humans love fiercely. As reports continued to stream in about approaching human ships, other species began evacuating the station. The Vorthon trade delegation packed up immediately. The Crystalline Collective recalled their representatives. Even the usually fearless warrior guild of Maxis decided to postpone their negotiations. Within 6 hours, Nexus Prime had lost 60% of its alien population. Those who remained were mostly station personnel who couldn't leave, and a few species who were curious to see what would happen when the human fleet arrived. In the research facility, Buddy's cries were getting weaker, but somehow they were also getting clearer. Lisa had boosted the transmission signal to maximum power, and now his voice was reaching across vast distances of space. On colony worlds, in mining stations aboard merchant vessels, everywhere humans could hear the broadcast. They stopped what they were doing and listened, and then they got angry. The cry of a lost puppy had become a rallying call for an entire species, and the humans were coming home. The battleship Iron Wolf arrived at Nexus Prime like a storm made of metal and fury. Admiral Rita Stone stood on the bridge watching the massive space station grow larger on her screens, surrounded by the 12 vessels of her battle group. But that wasn't what made her proud. What made her proud were the other ships. Dozens of them had arrived during the night. Cargo haulers, colony ships, mining vessels, private yachts, and everything in between. They formed a loose perimeter around the station, all bearing human registration codes. Rita had been in space for 25 years and commanded fleets in 3 major conflicts, but she'd never seen anything like this spontaneous gathering. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving messages from civilian vessels requesting permission to assist in the rescue operation. Rita looked at the tactical display. 43 civilian ships, most of them lightly armed or completely unarmed, but all willing to face whatever came next, all because they'd heard a puppy crying for help. Tell them to maintain position and await orders, Rita said, but thank them for coming. On Nexus Prime, the station commander Wix Thule was having the worst day of his career. His 6 arms moved frantically over control panels as he tried to manage the diplomatic crisis unfolding around his station. The humans are demanding immediate return of the animal, his aide reported. They're using what our translators identify as very impolite language. Wixthul's main eyes focused on the communication screen where Admiral Stone's face looked back at him with barely controlled anger. "Admiral, surely we can negotiate." "Commander," Stone interrupted, her voice cold as space itself. "I'm going to say this once. Return the puppy to his family, or we'll come aboard and get him ourselves." "But the diplomatic protocols were broken the moment they stole that dog," Stone said. "You have 1 hour." The communication ended, leaving Wixthul staring at a blank screen. He'd dealt with dozens of species over his career, but humans were different. Most aliens approached problems with logic, negotiation, and careful consideration of consequences. Humans approached problems like a pack of predators protecting their young. In the Zephyrian research wing, Veltar was discovering just how badly his species had misunderstood their new trading partners. Reports flooded in about the human fleet surrounding the station, and none of it made sense to his crystalline mind. "They brought weapons of war to retrieve a single animal," he said to his research team, his harmonics shrill with confusion. The energy readings from their weapon systems could destroy this entire station. The lead researcher's crystal form was dim with uncertainty. "Perhaps the creature has some strategic value we failed to detect?" But Dr. Phillips, who had been monitoring their communications through her scanner, knew better. She turned to Jake with tears in her eyes. "They don't understand. The Zephyrians evolved from hive mind crystal entities. They've never experienced individual emotional bonds. To them, love is just a chemical reaction they can study." Through the research chamber's barrier, they could see Buddy still strapped to the examination table. The puppy was barely moving now, exhausted from hours of fear and stress. His small body rose and fell with rapid, shallow breaths, but his eyes were still alert, still looking for rescue. Danny hadn't left the barrier in over a day. His hand was pressed against the force field as close to Buddy as he could get. "Hold on, boy," he whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." Jake's communicator buzzed with an incoming message from Admiral Stone. "Lieutenant Morrison, we're beginning boarding procedures in 30 minutes. Can you guide our teams to the puppy's location?" "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied. "But Admiral, the research wing is protected by diplomatic immunity. Station security might resist." "Let me worry about station security," Stone said grimly. What Jake didn't know was that Admiral Stone had spent the last hour in communication with every major power in the galaxy. The conversation had been short and to the point. The Alteran Council had suggested negotiation. Stone's response: "We don't negotiate with kidnappers." The Kelran Federation had offered to mediate. Stone's reply: "Mediate what?" "They took our family member." The Warrior Guild of Maxis had actually laughed, their translator rendering it as approval. Humans fight for their packmates. This shows honor. But it was the Zephyrian High Command's response that sealed everything. When contacted directly, they had dismissed the entire incident as inefficient emotional attachment to a worthless creature. That was when Rita Stone realized this wasn't just about Buddy anymore. This was about showing the galaxy what humanity stood for. The boarding began exactly on schedule. Colonel Amy Foster led the first wave, 20 Marines in full combat gear, moving through Nexus Prime's corridors with practiced efficiency. Behind them came medical teams, technical specialists, and Admiral Stone herself. Station security didn't resist. Wixthul had made the calculation that any species willing to deploy military assets over a single animal was not a species he wanted to fight. The diplomatic wing was a different matter. As the Marines approached the research facility, Veltar activated additional security barriers and sent out a galaxy-wide communication declaring the humans in violation of interstellar law. The response was immediate and universal. Silence. Every major power in the galaxy had monitored the situation. They'd all heard Buddy's cries echoing across human communication networks. They'd all watched 40-plus human ships converge on a single point in space for one small animal. And they'd all reached the same conclusion. Humanity was either completely insane, or they understood something about survival that everyone else had forgotten. Colonel Foster reached the research facility and stared through the barriers at Buddy's small form on the examination table. The puppy saw the human uniforms and tried to lift his head, his tail giving one weak wag. "Admiral," Foster said into her communicator. "I've got eyes on the target. He's alive but in bad shape." Stone's voice came back immediately. "Get him out of there." Foster turned to the Zephyrian researchers visible through the barrier. "Open this facility now or we'll open it for you." Veltar's harmonics were sharp with indignation. "This is a violation of diplomatic protocols." "You have no authority here." "I have the only authority that matters," Foster replied, holding up a device that made the crystal barriers flicker. "I have a scared puppy who wants to go home." The barriers fell with a sound like breaking glass. Foster's team moved quickly, their medic immediately going to Buddy's side while Marines secured the facility. The puppy was weak and dehydrated, but alive. When Danny finally held Buddy in his arms again, the puppy's tail wagged so hard his entire body shook. He covered Danny's face with weak kisses, whimpering with relief and joy. The sound that went out over human communication networks then wasn't crying anymore. It was pure happiness, a puppy reunited with his family. Across human space, on ships and stations and colony worlds, people smiled and wiped their eyes. The cavalry had arrived, the pack had come home. But in the research facility, Veltar watched the scene with growing understanding. The humans weren't crying tears of relief, they were crying tears of rage. "You tortured him," Danny said quietly, holding Buddy close. "For science. You tortured a puppy for science." Admiral Stone stepped into the facility, her presence filling the room like contained thunder. She looked at the examination table, the restraints, the instruments designed to measure fear and pain. "Veltar," she said, her voice carrying across the galaxy through communication networks. "You wanted to understand human emotional attachment. Congratulations, you're about to get a lesson you'll never forget." Admiral Stone stood in the research facility, looking down at Veltar and his team of Zephyrian scientists. Around her, Marines maintained security while the medical team worked on Buddy. The puppy was weak but stable, finally safe in Danny's arms after his terrible ordeal. "Do you want to know what you've learned from your research?" Stone asked the aliens. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 43 ships and every human who had heard Buddy's cries. Veltar's crystal form rang with uncertain harmonics. "We have gathered valuable data about interspecies emotional bonding." "No," Stone interrupted. "You've learned what happens when you hurt our family." She gestured toward the screen showing the space around Nexus Prime, where human ships formed a protective barrier around the station. "Every one of those vessels came here because they heard a puppy crying for help. Merchants, miners, colonists, warriors, they all dropped everything and came running." Dr. Phillips stepped forward, her scanner still in hand. "Admiral, I've been monitoring Zephyrian communications. Their high command is calling for calm, but their research division wants to study this unprecedented human response to what they term animal distress signals." Stone's eyes went cold. "They want to study us? Fine. Let me give them something to study." She activated her communicator, opening a channel to the entire galaxy. Every species with communication technology would hear this transmission, and many would remember it for generations to come. "This is Admiral Rita Stone of the Human Colonial Defense Fleet, broadcasting from Nexus Prime. Today, representatives of the Zephyrian Collective took a puppy from a human family and subjected him to torture in the name of research. They wanted to understand human emotional attachment to other species." Her voice carried across star systems, reaching every corner of known space. "Let me explain it to them and to every species listening. Humans don't just form governments or trade agreements. We form families, and family isn't limited by species, biology, or logic. When we adopt an animal into our family, they become as precious to us as our own children." Danny looked down at Buddy, who was sleeping peacefully in his arms for the first time in days. The puppy's breathing was steady, his small body finally relaxed. Around them, the Marines maintained their protective formation, every one of them understanding exactly why they were there. The Zephyrians asked why we would risk diplomatic relations over just an animal. Stone continued. The question reveals how little they understand about what makes humanity strong. We didn't risk anything, we protected what matters most. She paused, letting her words sink in across the galaxy. Every species we've encountered asks the same question. What makes humans so successful? How did you spread so far so fast? How do you maintain unity across such vast distances? Stone looked directly at Veltar. The answer is standing right here. We don't abandon our family. Ever. No matter how small they are, no matter what species they belong to, no matter what anyone else thinks about the logic of our love. The communication logs showed that the broadcast was being received on over 10,000 worlds. Ancient species with millions of years of history were listening to a human explain the power of love. Today, 43 human vessels came to rescue one puppy, Stone continued. Not because he was valuable or strategic or useful. Because he was ours. Because family doesn't get left behind. Colonel Foster approached with a report. Admiral, the Zephyrian High Command is requesting immediate negotiations. They're offering technological exchanges, territorial concessions, pretty much anything we want. What do we want, Colonel? Stone asked, though she already knew the answer. Foster looked at Buddy sleeping in Danny's arms. We want to go home. But the galaxy wasn't ready to let this moment pass quietly. Within hours, diplomatic communications were pouring in from every major power. The Alteran Council wanted to establish formal treaties with humanity. The Kelran Federation was offering exclusive trading partnerships. Even the mysterious Voidwalkers had sent a message, their first communication with any species in over a century. The message was simple. We understand. Family transcends all. On Earth, Senator Brooks was in emergency session with the Global Council. The reaction has been unprecedented, she reported. 17 species have requested formal diplomatic relations. 6 others want to establish embassy exchanges. The entire political balance of the galaxy has shifted. All because of a puppy? Asked Councilman Martinez. All because of what we did for that puppy, Brooks corrected. Every species out there is now asking the same question. What would humans do for us if we were family? Back on Nexus Prime, the Zephyrians were learning exactly what they'd unleashed. Veltar faced Admiral Stone in what had once been a research facility, and was now effectively human territory. We apologize for our misunderstanding, Veltar said, his harmonics subdued. We did not comprehend the depth of human attachment to companion species. Stone nodded. That's a start. But apologies aren't enough. What do you require for forgiveness? Stone looked at the examination table where Buddy had been tortured, then at the instruments designed to measure fear and pain. You wanted to study emotional bonds? Fine. But you'll do it the right way. Over the following weeks, the Zephyrians found themselves hosting the galaxy's first interspecies psychology program. Human researchers worked alongside alien scientists to understand how different species formed emotional connections. The research was voluntary, ethical, and focused on building understanding, rather than exploitation. The program's first success came when a young Zephyrian researcher named Kalenth formed an attachment to a service dog brought by the human team. The emotional breakthrough was documented and shared across both species networks. We never knew, Kalenth reported to his superiors, his harmonics carrying new emotional overtones. The connection. It makes you stronger, not weaker. The human phrase unconditional love now has meaning for us, but the real change happened on a smaller scale. Danny returned to Earth with Buddy fully recovered, where 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez waited at the spaceport with tears in her eyes. The reunion was broadcast across human space, not as propaganda, but as proof that sometimes the most important victories are measured in wagging tails and children's laughter. Years later, when alien diplomats wanted to understand humanity's rapid expansion and influence among the stars, they were told about the Buddy incident. The day humans went to war over a puppy and revealed that their greatest strength wasn't technology or tactics, but their refusal to let family suffer alone. The story became part of galactic history, studied in schools and universities across 100 worlds. But for humans, it was something simpler and more profound. It was proof that love makes you strong enough to cross the universe for those who need you most. And in a small house on Earth, a golden retriever named Buddy slept peacefully beside a little girl's bed, dreaming of stars and knowing that no matter how far he traveled, his family would always come for him, because that's what families do.